petrol price in Bengaluru has crossed 103 rupees today. The price today is 103 rupees 28 paise for regular petrol. For speed petrol, that's even higher.
Petrol price per litre in the national capital are inching close to rupees 100. Yes, that's right. The current price per litre is rupees 99.86.
Hello everyone, you're watching News Epicenter with me, Marya Shakil. The second wave has ebbed and India is unlocking. But citizens are still smarting under the economic blow as a surge in prices of essential goods from food to fuel has hit the household budgets of millions of Indians struggling to get back on their feet. There has been a meteoric rise in domestic fuel prices since the first week of May. Petrol and diesel prices have been hiked 35 times during this period. As of today, there are nearly 24 cities where petrol is retailing over 100 rupees per litre. In Mumbai, a litre of petrol is currently retailing at almost 106 rupees per litre, while it is all set to cross the 100 rupee mark in Delhi for the first time. Diesel prices are also rising rapidly, with very few cities where the retail rates are below 90 rupees per litre. In Rajasthan's Ganganagar, the price of diesel has crossed the 3-figure mark. This has had a cascading effect on the price of food, with the rise in transportation costs and the global prices of edible oils, as well as a major dip in imports. Along with this, low domestic stocks have increased the prices of the most commonly eaten pulses like arhar, moong, masoor and urad dal by over 20% in the first 5 months of 2021. All types of meat, fish and eggs have also shown a price rise of close to 30% since January this year. The Aam Aadmi continues to bear the brunt and is in dire need of relief. So what is the road ahead and the inflation solution as the nation unlocks to reboot the economy? Joining me first on the show is Niti Aayog CEO Amitabh Kant. He's our big newsmaker right now. Mr. Kant, I appreciate your time here. Petrol prices hiked 35 times and diesel 34 times in 2 months. Seems there is no respite for the common man. Is the central government looking to bringing down taxes, seeing the trend of increase in the crude oil prices recently?
So Maria, actually global prices are translating into higher domestic prices. Domestic retail prices have gone up largely in edible oils and pulses, which are agri commodities that India very significantly imports. The country meets its 70 to 74% of the domestic demand of vegetable or edible oils through imports. And in pulses, while our domestic output has risen in recent times, there is still imports and they still exert considerable influence on domestic prices. What is happening is globally that international prices of both these commodities have been soaring high. And the spike in international prices of food commodities are actually making imports costlier. And what has happened is that the government has reduced import duties on, this will provide immediate relief to consumers. Effective duty on crude palm oil has been reduced. Effective duty of refined palm oil has also been reduced. And my view is that import duty reduction in India could see prices fall in the coming months.
Okay.
And as you are aware, because of COVID, there has been disruption in supply because of constant lockdowns. And you have to see it in the context of both the COVID and the rise in global prices.
Okay.
But in the long term, I think what we need to do is to build up a very stable domestic production base of edible oils, which will prevent global
Okay.
prices from causing major spikes in domestic
Okay.
inflation.
Okay. Mr. Kant, value added tax, that is VAT, make up the largest chunk of increase in prices. Can there be an upper limit set to fixing the limit, that is the VAT rates? You are saying that eventually prices will go down. When will that be? Can you give some sort of timeline for the common man?
We must understand that India is a price taker in several commodities, and there are challenges because of COVID. Now, many people argue that on fuel our excise duty must be reduced, etc. The challenge for the country right now is that we need to vaccinate our population.
Right.
We need to ensure that we are able to provide food for 800 million people. We need to lay a lot of focus on infrastructure. If you want to revive your economy, just focus heavily on infrastructure. And now the new Supreme Court judgment says that you also, in addition to the state government, you also give ex gratia payments to those where people have died because of COVID. So the challenge for the government also is to revive Indian economy. Where does it get its resources from? Now it can go and borrow from the market, but then when you borrow from the market, you crowd out private investment altogether, and there is also a need for private sector investment. Plus, government borrowing also leads to higher inflation. So there are many challenges. There's no easy solution,
Right.
because
Yes.
you need to. There are no easy. There's a dilemma before the government, and the dilemma before the government is that the taxes are not so buoyant. And because taxes are not so buoyant, it needs to invest its resources through what it's getting on oil, excise duty on oil, etc., to invest on infrastructure, invest on ensuring vaccination for the people. So there are no easy choices. I mean, when people,
Absolutely.
this is
You
a
know,
very, this is a
yes.
Yes.
the important point
Yes.
for where the government has taken the right call is really to push for reduction in import duties on both crude palm oil and refined palm oil, and to ensure that any disruption in supplies anywhere and on account of logistics is fully managed well. And I'm quite confident that in the next 2 to 3 months,
Okay.
the prices will come down because of these measures.
Okay, so you're giving some kind of timeline here. Amul, in fact, recently hiked milk prices across India, blaming high input costs. So the fuel price hike is now affecting other sectors as well. The reasons Amul has cited are high transport charges, packaging and logistics. And like milk, prices of other items will increase as well. What will be your response to that?
Yeah, so what is happening is because of these COVID disruptions, many of these things have happened. My view is that the government will take a very, very considered stand. The government is absolutely concerned about inflation. The government wants to ensure that the citizens of the country have a stable price mechanism. The country is not impacted. The citizens of the country are not impacted because of inflation. And therefore, it will take a very, very considered view. It is taking all these factors into consideration, and will take into consideration also the fact that the economy needs to grow with adequate investments in infrastructure sector.
Okay, Mr. Kant, the price of non-subsidized LPG cylinders have been hiked by ₹25 with effect from July 1st. Apart from putting additional burden on household budgets, the constant increase in the LPG prices have also impacted the lives of lakhs of roadside vendors in India as well. Don't you think the LPG price hike could have been postponed?
I think, Marya, there are many consequences why when price hikes takes place because of import. We are very heavily dependent on our petroleum products and imports. Actually, prices of petroleum products have gone up globally. So you will have to take a beating somewhere. And if you look at fuel prices across the world, they've gone up very, very substantially. And that is the main reason. So all the inflation that you are seeing in India today is because of global scenarios. But I'm quite sure that the government is aware of all the options. It is considering, the global Brent crude prices have been on the upswing quite substantially. They've moved up to, from about $50, they've moved up to about $72. Therefore, some of this is getting impacted because we are a net importer. But in policy terms, the government is looking at all possible options and will come out with a strategy soon.
Okay, last question to you, Amitabh Kant. The Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana's latest version completely does away with free allocation of pulses to households. And this isn't really good news for those struggling to meet their nutritional requirements when they have been really hit hard by this COVID wave.
So government is providing all that it has in its supplies. It is providing food for about 800 million people. And it will continue to provide food. It will continue to review the situation. It will continue to ensure that people are not impacted, and will push for both Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana to ensure that households continue to get their food, and will continue to ensure adequate employment is also provided through the Manrega. Both these have been very powerful weapons during the COVID period, and government will continue to do everything possible to ensure that citizens of India, particularly in rural areas and those below poverty line, are not impacted at all as far as their lives and livelihood are concerned.
All right, Amitabh Kant, thank you so much for your time here on News Epicenter.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me bring in my guests now. Professor Gaurav Vallabh is the spokesperson of the Congress. Gopal K. Agarwal, spokesperson of the BJP. We have Dipanshu Mohan, he's the Director, Center for New Economic Studies at Jindal School of Liberal Arts and Humanities. Gaurav Vallabh, beginning with you. We had seen similar inflationary pressure last year when the lockdown was implemented, when the retail inflation index went up to about 7% and eased subsequently. Then what is your concern if this trend is being replicated again in the post-second wave era? Many would say this is only transitory.
Maria, good question, because issue is that last time when you were quoting 7% retail inflation data, the WPI was not close to 13%. But unfortunately, this time the WPI is also 13%. That clearly indicates economically that this inflation, the retail inflation, is not going to come down. And you know what is the basic reason of this rise, constant rise in the inflation in last few months? There are 4 reasons. Number one, petrol and diesel prices. The gentleman just before me, Mr. Kant, was criticizing his own government. He was telling that petrol and diesel prices had gone up because of international crude prices. He was not aware that before 2014 also, the same crude prices were affecting the petrol and diesel prices. That time the government which is in power right now, they used to do a lot of drama on roads, number one. Number 2 point, economically, I want to say, Marya, that the health sector spending had gone up during this pandemic. And unfortunately, the retail inflation data doesn't capture that increase in spending. Number 3rd point, Maria, as per CMI, in 2020, 97% Indians become poorer. And there is a contraction in the GDP of minus 7.3%. When there is a inequality in income with the contraction, the inflation was bound to increase. Economically, this is supposed to happen. And 4th, the most unfortunate thing which had happened, Maria, in last 1 year, and I can say in last 1 or 2 months, that in spite of bumper food grain production, our FY21 food grain production was was more than 30 crore tons, which is more than the FY 19-20 data by 2.66%. In spite of bumper food grain production, the inflation is going up. It means there is a severe supply chain disruption. It means there are some stockists who are stocking the things and government is not doing. So government has to come out of a slumber of that attitude that मैं प्याज नहीं खाती. उस attitude से बाहर आना पड़ेगा Marya, and just try to provide solution.
Yes.
And
Okay. So
if
what is the solution here, Gopal Agarwal? The government may be. I'm coming to you, Gaurav Vallabh. The government may be buying food grains and lentils from farmers to ease out the supply chain disruption, but wouldn't putting so much of cash in hands of farmers add to the inflationary pressure? How do you intend to really address that aspect?
Marya, it is very important that we look into the economic aspect on a macroeconomic level also. The pandemic has caused severe disruption in many of the economic activities, and I agree with Gaurav Vallabhji when he says that there is a supply disruptions, and that is mainly because not only not hoarding, but because of the pandemic, that many of the industries etc. have, and transportation etc. saw very difficult times, and therefore there was a supply chain disruption, and government is hopeful that as the economic activity picks up, this supply chain disruption will go away. One thing. Second thing is the issue which Mr. Amitabh Kant also made, that there are specific commodities which India is dependent on imports. Those items are facing this inflation. Overall inflation is much below, is around 6.53%, and that is much below which existed in earlier times. So pandemic is one thing.
Petrol and diesel prices increased at over 30 times in the last 2 months. Why is it that the government is not stepping in and reducing the central excise taxes instead of burdening the common man?
That's a very important, Marya, this is a very important question which have been answered by us many times, but still I go again, that the total revenue collection of the government includes petroleum, excise, indirect tax, GST, direct tax, everything. So overall, if you see from the last year, etc., there has been a drastic fall in the direct, indirect tax and every collection. And the government expenditure has gone up many more times. 36% the government has increased its expenditure, and the correct collection side, revenue side had fallen earlier by 14%. So government is looking in areas where people needs direct support, and therefore we are focusing on providing food grains, free food grains to almost 80 crore population.
Before I go back to Gaurav Vallabh, let me get a quick word from Mr. Dipanshu Mohan. Mr. Dipanshu Mohan, how do you think it would take, and what would it really take for the world supply chain and commodity prices to ease? Amitabh Kant here, if you heard him, says that the prices will be brought under control by September. Can we really look at a timeline of that nature, given the unpredictability of this virus?
Yeah, Marya, respectfully, I don't agree with Mr. Kant. And I have, the one strange point about policy analysts is that they need to get into more debates, especially those who are advising the government, because I think this mid-20th century macroeconomic wisdom that it's global prices conventionally, if that's the case, you would have seen prices in India of fuel coming down last year. They didn't, right? So the question to really ask is that to what extent and to what percentage is the change in volatility of global fuel prices really causing the price hike? In the last show, I explained and I gave you a breakup that 33 rupees out of a liter is on excise by the center, around 26 to 27 by the state. And one thing to point out, which is something which is very easily ignored, the excise duty that is being levied generally by the center may be justified, saying that, well, we are under a fiscal crisis, the government needs to do a lot more for the people, so we have to raise taxes somewhere. Well, if that's the case, then you need to share that revenue with the states. The current tax that is levied on fuel is largely in form of a cess, not an excise duty, which would have an obligation on the center to share the revenue of the gains made with the state. It isn't doing that, which what it does is puts pressure on the states to put its own VAT. And that's the question you asked with Mr. Kant, and you very carefully ignored responding to it. And as a result of that, you're seeing what you're seeing now. Last time around, I predicted and I suggested that our inflation level on CPI, which wasn't a worry the last time we spoke, is going to really go higher and higher with every passing week. And I would stick my neck out and say, as far as I can, you do not see inflation coming down at least by the end of 2021. And I mean, the RBI estimate is on an average 5.1. It is nowhere going to be close than that figure.
Okay. You know, Gaurav, of all the central taxes collected on petroleum products, the states get 42% of it. Besides, they also levy their own taxes. Then why don't state governments run by the Congress, say in Punjab, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, reduce the state tax and share the burden?
Marya, good question. And I would like to give a detailed answer. Give me 60 seconds time. The total excise duty levied per litre by Government of India on petrol is 32 rupees 90 paisa. Out of 32 rupees 90 paisa, 20 rupee 50 paisa is cess. Marya, cess is Government of India's kitty. It is not going to be shared. This is what window dressing or chalaki Government of India had done while collecting excise duty on petrol and diesel. Per litre excise duty on diesel is 31 rupee 80 paisa. Out of 31 rupee 80 paisa, cess is 22 rupees. Means 22 रुपए में कुछ हिस्सा नहीं देना है. Only distributable surplus will be for the remaining 9.8 rupees per litre of diesel which Government of India is collecting. And the gentleman from BJP, what argument he is making, I am making only 3 small data points just for his reflection. He is telling that we are not having source of revenue. Petrol, diesel, we are not earning. Sir, in 1920, on petrol, diesel sales, Government of India had collected 2.23 lakh crore. In 2021, the same amount is 3.89 lakh crore. 2.25 lakh से 3.25 lakh के करोड़ के ऊपर आ गए हो in 1 year's time, and that is what you are looting the common people by imposing duties in the form of petrol and diesel. And the petrol and diesel is going to impact directly common people of our country, because 90% of the people who are employed in unorganized sector is getting the most affected because of the hike in petrol and diesel. So don't do these window dressing. Give immediate relief to the common people of our country.
Okay, Gaurav, since you have talked about it, immediate relief, what can be that immediate relief? 30 seconds on that. What would you have done differently?
Immediate relief. Immediately reduce the excise duty on petrol and diesel to boost the demand in the economy. The increased demand will increase consumption, and increased consumption will create new employment. Try to transfer the direct money in the hands of the poorest of people. And I can give you three sources of revenue in 30 seconds. Number 1, get the revenue from the issuance of COVID bonds. Number 2, impose security transaction tax. Every day, 10,000 crore of transactions are taking place in spite of minus 7.3% of contraction in GDP. Stock markets are booming. So impose the taxes in the stock market transaction. Collect the money by imposing transaction tax on the security market. Collect the money by issuing the COVID bonds, and this additional money should be immediately transferred to the hands
from you, and then I'll give the final words to Dipanshu.
Ultimately, Marya, economy has to run on the economic parameters. Fiscal deficit is high, the borrowing is very high. The center has to do all the expenditure on the various scheme, whether it is fiscal stimulus or anything. So and the state government is directly collecting about 23% on the VAT, and then also taking the share from the center, whatever amount. So that amounts to a very high percentage on petrol. And when the all fiscal stimulus package expenditure, etc., vaccination, healthcare, oxygen, all things are, and direct benefit transfers, all these things are being spent by the center. It is more responsibility of the states to do its
so you are saying that the states should do their part. Dipanshu, I'll give you the final words. Since you have painted a very gloomy picture saying that the inflation figures will only rise till 2021 December, is the heightened wholesale price index a result of base effect, and how do you think it will play out in the post-COVID economic recovery?
No, that's difficult to say because, with the current pandemic, as you know, this time with the second wave, the states and local authorities were asked and to be flexible with inducing localized lockdowns. So with the wholesale price index, what you need to see is the localized lockdowns in place or restrictions that will continue putting supply side, bottlenecks in place will keep the prices volatile. I don't think that's really a problem. Even if you can maintain inflation at somewhere around 5.5 to 6 at this point of time, would be all right. The question we have to really ask, and what Mr. Kant said, and I want to use that word because that's the key word here, is context. We are right now in one of our worst period of economic crises since independence. And I'll say again, it's not just because inflation, but you need to see the context in which this is playing out. Our unemployment level is high. We are in a low to no growth cycle. Our debt levels are exacerbating, and particularly those at the bottom of the socioeconomic pyramid are really getting affected. And the heightened degree of uncertainty and anxiety is making people to hedge by buying more gold, which is going to continue keeping prices higher. So you are entering into what you would consider, we've already entered into one of our worst macro and microeconomic crises in the last 70 years, because there's always this narrative of last 70 years,
also because,
nothing else has
it's
been
once
done.
in a lifetime
And
pandemic, and hence the challenges are very different. Dipanshu, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to Gaurav Vallabh and also Dr. Gopal Agarwal. That's all from me. Thanks so much for watching. This is One Debate which must continue on News18.com.